Hi, fantasy fiction fans, and welcome to Myth and Magic, a fantasy writer's kit bag. I'm fantasy writer Neil Mack, the author of Moondog and the Reed Leopard, and I want to share my love of folklore, local history and nature mythology with writers and creatives like you on my regular podcasts. It's designed with fellow indie publishers and writers in mind, but all fans of fantasy fiction are very welcome to join in. In my fantasy writer's kit bag, writers, artists and creatives will find lots of ideas and discussion about things such as potions, dark arts, fabulous creatures, folktale studies, nature lore, and the interesting history behind the myth and magic that underpins our understanding of the fictional universe. What is animism? When I was about 5 or possibly 6 years old, I woke up in bed one morning with a completely new and quite perplexing perception. And it was this: I exist. This is me, I said to myself. It's me, and this is this, and that is a bed, and over there are the curtains, but I'm me. I'm alive. It's very likely in fact, that all humans experience the same moment of clarity at some time in their early years of life. But I don't know if they do, because I've never heard anybody talk about it before. And I'm concerned, actually, that perhaps children don't nowadays, and perhaps it's due to all the external pressures and interruptions and temptations and constantly distracting stimuli that kids are bombarded with these days. But hopefully all humans experience the same moment of clarity. I remember the feeling at the time, and I knew that the concept was very hard to hold on to for very long, as if it was a slippery fish, and that I had caught it between my childish fingers, and yet it wanted to wriggle free. The idea wanted to wriggle free. So eventually I had to let go of the idea because it was too hard to hold on to for very long. But I knew that once I'd caught it, I could at least grab it again whenever I wanted to, and next time the concept would be a whole lot easier to understand and to grab onto. So that was my moment of sentience. I suppose it might have been a physical process, and it might be twinned with a mental process. But I knew even then, at aged 5 or 6, that my knowledge could only be fully known from the inside. In other words, subjectively. For example, when I tried to explain what I'd experienced to my younger sister, she had no idea what I was talking about. And even in later years, when I approached the subject with close friends or with family members, it was obvious they had no reference point that would help them comprehend my moment of sentience. So it was a thing that can't be seen, almost can't be grasped, and it can only be understood from the inside. But what about other things? Do other things, not me, but do other things possess a sentience? Because I know I do. But does anything else? Does anything else possess a life spirit? If it's hard for me to decide whether humans, other humans that I know even, possess the same kind of individuality that I sense, then it must be even harder to explain sentience in a wider sense that encompasses all things. And it's going to be rather tricky to try to explain to you that all things might well possess sentience, but I'm going to give it a go anyway. Animism means everything has the same sense of aliveness that I had that morning when I woke up, aged about 5 or 6. Everything in the universe has what you might want to call a life force or a vitality, but everything has it, every atom, every cell. Taken from the Latin anima, A-N-I-M-A, which means breath of life or life spirit. It's a long-held belief that everything, all objects, all places, all creatures possess their own distinctive spiritual essence. And it's difficult for us irreligious and materialistic pragmatists of the 21st century world to understand such a crazy notion that even things like rocks and wood and glittering streams, all these things have souls and spirits and some kind of inner sentience. Rocks, wood and glittering streams possess sentience, i.e. the capacity to feel and perceive and experience their own existence, exactly the same way that I did when I was 5. So although it's difficult for us irreligious, materialistic and pragmatic people of the 21st century, Western world to understand it, yet adherents of Eastern religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism and Jainism, find the notion relatively undemanding. And consciousness, anyway, is itself so mysterious that philosophers and scientists still argue over what it really actually is. And a statement such as only humans possess sentience is less likely to be true than the other way around. In fact, it wasn't until 2012 that scientists finally agreed that animals had sentience. In a lecture hall stuffed with renowned scientists at the University of Cambridge, Dr. Stephen Hawking, no less, said, "It's obvious to everyone in this room that animals have consciousness. But it's not obvious to the rest of the world. It's not obvious to the rest of the Western world or the Far East. And it's not obvious to society." That was the famous Declaration on Consciousness. In his novel, The Hobbit, J.R.R. Tolkien described roots of mountains and feet of trees. And as fantasy fiction fans, we comprehend the notion that a bit of old wood can be fashioned into a magic wand, and a lump of old rock can be used as a throne for a king's coronation ceremony. But do we really relate to and recognise the true heavenly magic of those simple objects? Do we understand that hidden within the physicality of everyday objects, such as rock or wood, are fragments of memory, sub-microscopic energies, and ineffable understanding? Do we appreciate that as parts of a great creation or evolution, whichever one is your bag, these simple inanimate objects contain the numinous nature of the universe, held like treasure within them? When Europeans started to explore the globe and encountered tribes of primitive people, they thought they had come across people who were childish in their worldview, because these primitive people anthropomorphized inanimate objects, a bit like they believed teddy bears could talk and could interact and have tea parties, and they would grow out of it. But since most European conquerors were also religious types, they tended to view this animism that they found as something akin to nature worship, which they deemed a sin. So the primitive people were needing rescue from such faulty beliefs, and the European conquerors sought to convert them to a true religion, in this case Christianity, that might save their immortal souls. But animism is a belief that everything, every object, has a life force within it, and some kind of sentience. Now, is this crazy? Is it a crazy idea? Is it primitive? Well, what about this? We love to read, don't we, you and I? Letters written on a page or letters on a computer screen give us such joy and enlightenment, don't they? Right? However, what exactly are those letters? What exactly are those letters? They are merely ink stains on paper or pixels on a screen. Yet we can see what they say, can't we? But what do they actually say? What do ink stains on a page and pixels on a screen actually say themselves? Do they speak to us by themselves? No. The letters on the paper or the screen don't actually speak to us themselves. It is some mysterious unseen thought behind the letters that does all the communication. Do you see? But let's take this one step further. When I read a poem on a page, a poem that's just made of ink stains or pixels, I get something from that poem. In fact, I might get something that you may not. You may get something that I do not. How come? Why is this? I think it's because the thought behind the letters isn't just the thought of the original writer, and you might call the original writer, by the way, the designer of original thought. No, there must also be a unique contribution from the reader to make the magic of reading work, and you might want to call the reader the perceiver. So, working together in concert, both the designer and the perceiver participate in the miracle of reading. The designer starts the thought process and the perceiver adds the extra dimension. And that's just ink stains and pixels. Now, if there's a designer and a perceiver element in ink stains and pixels, why not extend the concept to include such things as spiders in webs, or ancient trees, or gushing rivers, or lichen-encrusted boulders? All these inanimate objects once spoke to our ancestors, and they once spoke to primitive people, those people that I mentioned earlier who were conquered. And they ought to speak to us now too. What is the original thought behind a cobweb? And what does it tell us about life when we consider it? What has an ancient tree experienced? And what can we learn about its life? A flowing river gives us joy. But what does that flowing say to us about our own lives? And why does a lichen-encrusted boulder seem wise and noble? How should we respond to its inherent majesty and its gravitas, in other words, its dignity? You see, there is an element of participation in these animisms. Just like when we contemplate the written word, we ought to meditate on the meaning of these things in the same way that a perceiver does once the designer has created something. Now, this doesn't mean to say that you have to ritualize or spiritualize or sanctify rocks and trees, although you can if you want. I'm just suggesting that there's going to be religious fanatics out there who might have trouble accepting those types of animism on those terms. But there is no point in denying that animism is alive and well, and it is understood and celebrated in various mythologies around the world, and it's found in many cultures. And there is something magical and slightly mysterious about inanimate objects and how they talk to us. By the way, animism is not the same as pantheism, which I discussed in an earlier show. The essential difference is that pantheists believe that everything shares the same spiritual essence. For example, in the Star Wars series, the Force. While animists believe that everything has its own individual spiritual nature. And I will leave this topic with one final and scientific thought. The American quantum engineer and physicist Nick Herbert once said this: "Consciousness is an integral part of the physical world, not an emergent property of special biological or computational systems. And everything in the world is on some level a quantum system. If the world is truly quantum animated, then there is an immense amount of invisible inner experience going on all around us that is presently inaccessible to humans because our inner lives are imprisoned inside a small quantum system. a system that's isolated deep in the meat of our animal brains. So there's quantum engineer and physicist Nick Herbert discussing animism, and the simple truth is that it's not that we might be too clever to recognise that everything around us has a spiritual essence, but in reality it's because we're too stupid and too obtuse to realise that everything around us has a spiritual and obvious essence. Animism. Last week I discussed the vital ingredients of a quest. But of course, even though you're writing a fantasy fiction, you may not want to use a quest for your plot device. So I just wanted to go through the 7 basic plot elements, because the quest is just one of those 7. Now, English author Christopher Booker suggested that there are 7, including the quest. I've managed to condense it down a bit, and I'll explain why in a moment, but I just want to go through them. And these are the plot elements. Number 1, overcoming the monster. This is where the main character must defeat evil. And it's popular, and it was used in the James Bond movies and the Star Wars stories. Rags to riches. This is where your poor main character gains power and wealth, but loses it again for love. This was used in Brewster's Millions and in Great Expectations. Then there's the comedy. This is where the main character triumphs over adverse circumstances and conflict and confusion reigns, but there's a clarifying event that ties everything together, and you get this in Bridget Jones' Diary and in the film Dodgeball. Tragedy. The good main character has a flaw, and this becomes his or her undoing. This was used in Citizen Kane and in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. And rebirth. An event causes the main character to change their character for the better. And this was used in Groundhog Day and in A Christmas Carol. Overcoming the monster. Rags to riches. Comedy. Tragedy. And rebirth. And you've noticed that there are not 7. I left voyage and return till last because I'm having difficulty distinguishing it from the quest. But Booker suggests that in Voyage and Return, a main character travels to a strange place and overcomes threats, learns vital lessons and returns home with the experience. I suppose Gulliver's Travels is an example. Now, I guess there must be a call to travel for this voyage to begin, otherwise it would never have started. And for the voyage to be adventuresome in some way, it must involve travelling to another world. And the main character will need to gain some expert help or at least guidance along the way. So I can't see much difference between a voyage and a quest. In both plot types, the main character has to overcome challenges and has to return changed by the experiences. And Booker lists The Lion King, Aim Back to the Future, and The Hobbit all as voyage and return plots. Yet The Hobbit, which is also known as There and Back Again, which is a subtitle that might have confused Booker when he wrote this, is actually a series of episodic quests within a larger and broader coming-of-age story. So it doesn't fit that particular idea anyway. So if you don't use the quest for your plot, which of the other plot elements from the 7 only basic plots would you use for your fantasy fiction? Fabulous creature of the week, the warg. In Norse mythology, a warg, V-A-R-G-R, frequently anglicised to be pronounced warg, W-A-R-G, is any wolf that chases the sun and the moon. But in particular, it's the legendary wolf Fenrir and Fenrir's descendants. And you will note that Old English, wir, W-E-A-R-H, sounds like var, and is likely to be the root of our word were, as in werewolf, W-E-R-E-W-O-L-F. The Old English was W-E-A-R-H. Fenrir is the father of all wolves. He's the son of Loki, who's Odin's blood brother, and the brother of the world serpent, Jormungandr. Wolves are often known to rise up in their pack hierarchy and have, on occasion, even been recorded to rebel against and even kill their own parents to claim dominance within the pack. Thus, Fenrir must be kept down, or he's capable and even predestined, if you like, to rise up and claim sovereignty from his fathers. He's likely to raise up and to devour his own parenthood. So that's why Fenrir is an important character in Norse mythology. The giant wolves, known as wargs, can be used, like horses, to ride, and of course they're warlike. And in Tolkien's Middle-earth, wargs permitted orcs to ride on their backs into battle and to share the spoils of war. But wargs aren't any common or garden wolf. They possess autonomous minds. For example, they can devise plans and design some grand and effective strategies. And this is probably where they share a common ancestry with menacing predatory antagonists that are so often depicted as the big bad wolf. It's a common trope that's used in fairy tales and fables, and to this day is still used. And in these type of stories, the warg is often depicted as being as big as a human, being very sly, being deceptive, and being capable of speech, and capable of very complex interaction with humans, dressing up as a human, being unmistakable from a human at times. You see how a warg is similar to a werewolf. A direwolf, by the way, is not mythological at all. And in fact, it's an extinct species of carnivore that last lived on Earth approximately 9,500 years ago. It's not that long ago. It was not necessarily gigantic, by the way. It was about the same size as a modern grey wolf. And we think its over-reliance on large herbivores as its only food source probably brought about its demise as a species, whereas wargs are mythological animals, descend from the legendary wolf Fenrir.